Hi, I'm Cameron.
And I'm Hayden.
And this is
Until the End of Crime. Cameron, what do you know?
Not much.
Yes, but what do you just kidding. What do you know about the social media service Kik? K-I-K.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Kik?
I don't think so.
Okay, what about Snapchat?
Never heard of it. What do I know about Snapchat?
Yeah, like what are its features? What are some of its selling points? And maybe what were some of its sailing points? Sailing points?
Don't sail away.
What were some of its selling points circa 2016?
2016, you weren't being inundated with your AI chatbot thing or Snapchat Plus or whatever it is. It was taking pictures or videos that would disappear that you could send to people. You can add text and do filters. There was a very popular dog filter where it would lick the screen when you opened your mouth. I think the biggest appeal is that it would disappear. I want to say that's about the time that the chat feature became a thing.
Okay.
Because originally it was just sending snaps. Well, I guess sending pictures. And then a chat feature was added later, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Well, I think you're right. I think when I think back to 2016, 2015, Snapchat, and even when I was in college, was primarily used to send pictures back and forth, sometimes videos.
Do you want to know what else I remember about Snapchat 2016?
What?
Our streak.
Yeah.
We got that thing up to close to 1,300 days.
Uh-huh.
That was wild.
Yeah.
That's a lot of commitment for you.
That is. I had 2 really long Snapchat streaks, and then I said, I'm deleting Snapchat.
Yeah, I remember.
With that being said, you and I were even teaching together in 2016 and before.
Yeah, at the beginning of 2016, and then we went our separate ways.
Right. And so I think that we got to see how teenagers used Snapchat in action.
Yeah, probably.
And maybe not even necessarily see, but we definitely heard how they used Snapchat. So today's case involves the use of the social media apps Kik and Snapchat, both of which are kind of known for being this kind of anonymized experience where there isn't necessarily a history kept of your communication.
Okay, is that all we're going to learn about Kik?
At this point in time, yes.
Okay.
I will say that even prior to doing the research for today's case, I am familiar with Kik. I remember on online message boards, and God, I can't give you a time frame, but Kik would be this kind of platform where people of different ages would share their Kik and message each other. And I think it was really toxic and bad for young queer people because they would connect with older queer people through that app and do inappropriate messaging.
Yeah. When you say Kik and you talk about anonymity, it makes me think of Yik Yak.
Oh, mm-hmm.
That was an awful social media
I think that's
site.
back, but it's different.
It better be different. That shit was awful.
Yeah, it was.
That was just bully central.
You know, when I was in college, Yik Yak was really big, like 2012, 2013. And we would get in the honors lobby and just read the Yik Yaks out loud.
I used to sit and read them.
Yeah. Now, I took no pleasure in hearing the awful things that people said about others. But there was this one time where I yicked a yak.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
And I sent a little thing to Yik Yak.
Oh. D1 bully.
No. I said, I don't know who the seemingly odd guy is that is sitting on the porch swing thing at this part of the campus, but you are so hot. It was a nice Yik Yak. I guess I didn't have to say he was odd, but the way he sat there and just swung was a little odd.
I felt like you were going to say that it was you, that you sent something in and it was about you.
Oh, no. It was weird. Like, in my experience in college, of course, I went to a really small university. People would like try to pump each other up on Yik Yak, like build each other up. They would send nice things to Yik Yak. And I loved that. And then there was like a confessions of SAU Twitter, and people would send in whatever they wanted to send in to have tweeted. And people would just send nice stuff in. And I loved it. I did end up on those. but I don't remember ever being negatively brought up on Yik Yak.
I was too old for Yik Yak.
I also think it's so weird because your college experience was definitely different than mine.
Very.
So I fucking knew, I don't know, 2/3 of the campus population.
Right.
And you were at UT.
Yeah.
There's no way.
No. I was also working 2 jobs.
She's a go-getter, America and Canada and Liverpool, wherever.
Liverpool.
Germany, Shanghai. Whoever's listening, she's ready.
Ready for what?
To work. You love working.
I don't love working.
Anyway, so back to Kik and Snapchat. Can't even think. My brain is thinking Kik. You said Yik Yak. Then I was thinking TikTok. It's too much. Today's case, I think, is just as heartbreaking as it is baffling, confusing. I'm going to be talking about the disappearance of 16-year-old Mekayla Bali from Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Mekayla vanished on April 12, 2016, leaving her family, friends, and investigators searching for answers. Over 7 years later, this case remains open with no confirmed sightings or substantial leads. I want to preface this episode by providing a little insight. A lot of my information does come from really reputable resources like CTV News, CBC News, and other sources that you're going to find in the show notes. But I did rely a little bit on a particular YouTube creator's account and kind of management of the case. So if you hear me attribute something to Blame It on Jorge, please know that is the YouTuber that created really just the most kind of phenomenal primer on today's case.
We're not actually blaming Jorge for anything other than providing a wealth of information about this case.
Top notch. He did a really, really excellent job. I also include a little bit of analysis from Dr. Todd Grande, who is a doctor of counselor education.
And Ariana's dad.
Yeah, obviously. So I'm going to start us off by talking about Mekayla and really kind of who she is and what maybe led up to her disappearance. Mekayla Bali was born on July 2nd, 1999 in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. She was raised by her mother Paula and also supported by her maternal grandparents. Mekayla, by and large, was a quiet and introverted teenager. According to reports from CTV News and CBC News, she enjoyed really typical teenage hobbies like reading, photography, playing the violin, and her favorite books included the Hunger Games series. And she was also kind of like an avid online video game player and would play League of Legends. Have you heard of League of Legends?
Sure.
I've heard of it, but I've never played it.
I have not played.
Okay.
The list does not stop there.
Have you ever played anything?
Board games?
Okay.
You mean video games?
Sure.
Yes, but probably nothing notable.
Do you remember in school when everyone was playing RuneScape?
No. One
of the most searing insults I ever heard was from a student, and this was like 3 years ago. And they're like, "You look like somebody who played RuneScape." It was so ugly. It just took the air out of me.
Who was playing RuneScape? Was that in our time? Is that
Yes,
in their time?
Our time. But there is a part of like RuneScape and RuneScape lore that exists in this like Gen Z story and their culture.
Do you want to know that I don't know that I've ever even heard of RuneScape before?
I don't know how you haven't heard of it.
But a kid did tell me once that I looked like I liked horses.
What a slam.
And I was like, what does that mean, though? What does it mean? Is it supposed to be a negative thing? What does it mean?
I don't see how it could be positive.
If you're concerned, if you're saying it, but you're telling me that it doesn't mean anything other than it looks like I like horses, why are you concerned about somebody being in the room who does, in fact, like horses? Like, what does it mean? Spell it out for me like I'm 5 years old.
I think it's
worrisome.
Explain
to this room that you're being a bully right now, please. In your own words.
I think it's worrisome anytime someone is like, "You look like someone who enjoys X." I don't know. I know exactly what it means, but its implication is so vast, but also nothing, right?
Yeah.
You look like someone who enjoys true crime podcast. Okay. Do you know what I mean? You can say that about almost anything, and I feel like it is both a dig and a compliment.
Yeah.
Horses are cool.
They're majestic, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm not super into horses.
Well,
they're fine.
You need to work on your vibe. It's giving horse girl.
No. I don't need to work on my vibe. I am not going to alter my vibe based on the words of 15 and 16-year-olds. Thank you. I had a kid once tell me that I look like I smoked and drove like a Scooby-Doo type van or whatever and had cats. And I was like, no, I don't. I'm like,
Which
you
isn't
look
to
like
say that the comment wasn't funny.
No, it was funny, but I was like, no.
Paula described her daughter as shy, sweet, and fuck you. Ugh.
Paula described her
As shy, sweet, and deeply thoughtful, unlike the little dogs that run around this house. A quote, homebody who wasn't particularly adventurous. Mekayla was also said to be a very good listener and that her friends often confided in her. And despite her reserved demeanor, she was really well liked at Sacred Heart High School.
Can you imagine a friend group being like, yeah, we really love her. She's so close, but we do not confide in her. We do not trust her. She can't be trusted with our secrets.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can absolutely imagine it.
It's you.
There are some people that aren't meant to
Just
keep
kidding.
secrets.
You're very good at keeping a secret.
I am now. I wasn't always. I used to love for people to tell me secrets so I could go tell everybody else.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not a perfect person, and I never
I'm not a perfect person.
vary that. In 7th grade, my friend told me that she had a crush on somebody. I literally left
Her
her
math
locker
teacher?
and walked to a different locker, and I was like, oh my God, so-and-so has a crush on this person. No, it was not on a teacher. She was also a lesbian, but she said she liked a guy. Sorry, Paige. I was not a good friend to Paige in 4th grade through 7th grade.
Paige, you heard it here.
I'm so sorry, my friend.
Cancel that friendship. Unsubscribe.
This 26-year-long friendship, that's crazy, right? 26 years?
Yeah. God, what's it like to be that old?
It feels awful.
I'm only 22.
Except I've entered this era in my 30s where I'm just really not putting up with anything that isn't right. I don't feel like I have to be anyone's subordinate and be complicit in things that I think are not right or real. It's been very liberating. I don't like that I'm 32 because that feels old in my brain, but I also love being 32 because it's freeing. However, like many teenagers, Mekayla did have her struggles, according to Blame It on Jorge's YouTube analysis. And forgive me, but we're going into the weeds a little bit on Reddit. Mekayla had a history of self-harm. This was later corroborated by an entry from Mekayla in the Interpol database, which noted scars on her upper thigh. And while her mother, Paula, believed that Mekayla had moved past this phase, her social media activity painted a different picture. So for instance, I don't know if this is right. Can you have a bio on Snapchat?
You can have a story.
I know, but is there something were you able to do it in 2016? Either way, whether it was a bio, a message, a story, Mekayla did post looking for Snapchat friends because I have none in real life. Add me. Please don't be a greasy bleep and send me gross nudes. Just looking for a friend. This heartbreaking message suggests that Mekayla to some degree was feeling loneliness and isolation. Dr. Todd Grande, when doing his analysis over some of what he believed might have been the mental happenings of Mekayla, shared that posts like this really are meant to serve as signals of greater emotional distress. And so, again, very clearly, she was making an effort or an attempt to find someone who understood her and that she could rely on and have that kind of friendship with.
And you said that she posted that on her Snapchat story?
The resource said Snapchat bio. I don't know if there was ever Snapchat bios, but it was posted on her Snapchat in some capacity.
It sounds like it was a public story.
Right, which that very well may be the case. It's also worth noting, I really do not want to paint Mekayla as someone who was overly depressed or suicidal because there just isn't the evidence for that.
No, she sounds like a teenager.
A teenager going through it in some capacity. And most teenagers do. But self-harm that's not always a behavior that's expressed in all teenagers.
No.
And so there is a level of concern as to what was she feeling? What was she experiencing? And I think it is ominous anytime a teenager is making pleas with the world to fill a void that they're experiencing in their personal life. That's like the siren song for creepers and predators.
Certainly can be.
Yeah. You know what? I think back to when I was a teenager, maybe even a preteen, and I was posting on message boards I had no business posting on. I cannot fathom how many people from our generation talked to strangers on the internet and just lied about their age, lied about everything about themselves. themselves.
Yeah.
As such, Mekayla was really active on social media. She used Snapchat, Instagram, and Kik to communicate with friends and, unfortunately, probably strangers. According to CBC News, Kik does have a very negative reputation for being that anonymous chat platform that we discussed earlier, and especially predatory. And for me, I really kind of became more familiar with the reach of Kik as a tool when TikTok started to take off, and I was following gay content creators of our generation who talked about their online experience, and they talked about how they would talk to these older men on Kik, and that's the platform they would use, and they would go meet these older men. And
that's a pretty common experience for a young gay man, right?
It is
to meet up with an older gay man and have some sort of...
It's like a cultural touchstone in our community.
Yeah, because there's like a sense of, I guess, teaching that...
It is grossly and profoundly wrong. It is predatory.
Yeah.
But it is something that happens quite frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because there's so much
of this case you haven't covered yet,
and shame associated with being a young queer person.
Right.
And I think I'm so glad for like Gen Z and beyond who treat it almost like nothing.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they're going to end up making the same mistakes where they end up talking to these old fucks.
Yeah.
And making that part of their experience.
What was your old fuck's name?
Oh, I didn't have one. I had nothing like that, thankfully.
How did I know that was going to be the answer?
Yeah, never. No, I couldn't even. I've always hated old people. No, that's not true and that's not fair. But I didn't have any experiences like that. And you know what? Thankfully, I don't think a lot of the queer people I knew growing up had that experience either. So I can't say that 100% with certainty. Mm-hmm. But from my knowledge, most of the people who grew up with me.
But you grew up in a very small conservative area. So if there were older men in that community who were queer in any capacity, they would likely not have, they probably had wives and kids, and they wouldn't have
no real access to the internet. Most of those people get the fuck out because why would you stay?
Yeah, it sounds like something that would be more likely to happen in a more populated area.
Right.
Because there's a larger pool of people to have different experiences with. Whereas where you grew up, very tiny, very conservative, and either they are choosing to not experience their life as a homosexual person, or they're gone. They're not sticking around in a small conservative town if they have any control over it.
Right.
So it just seems like an experience that might be common, but probably not so much in a small town like that.
I do want to say I have a lot of love for my small town, but it's not a place I think I would be able to return, not long term, for kind of the reasons you just talked about. Not that I think I would be unwelcome, but it would never
not
feel...
with that last name.
So again, Mekayla was using Kik, and one of the things that became an issue early on in Mekayla's case is that because Kik was really kind of run on this anonymity, there was incredible difficulty getting any information from those different businesses, those different platforms. So Mekayla's use of social media was typical for a teenager, but also concerning. And on one hand, there is evidence that she used these platforms to build this community that she was looking for, but also that she was taking some risks.
Yeah.
In February 2016, 2 months before Mekayla vanished, she received a bouquet. A bouquet? Ooh, I hate it. Why is that such an ugly word? Received, is it French?
It's gotta be.
Received a bouquet of roses at school. Her friends noted that the flowers arrived in a plain cardboard box and was likely delivered from some online order.
Was this a Valentine's Day thing?
It was in February 2016, so maybe. Mekayla refused to say who sent her the flowers. And she never shared it with family. She never shared it with friends. They were very secret flowers, which unfortunately has created room for a lot of speculation about the connection between the flowers and her eventual disappearance.
And they were red roses, is that what you said?
Yes.
And she wouldn't tell anybody who they were from.
Correct.
So, okay. I'm not going to speculate because you just said that a lot of speculation was generated around that.
I also think, I mean, how fierce would it be to send yourself flowers on Valentine's Day and be like, oh, I can't say who sent these to me? You would center yourself in so many conversations throughout the day. So many people would want to know so desperately who your flowers were from.
When I was working in your hometown for Valentine's
You sent yourself
Day,
flowers?
No, but Whitney, hi Whitney, she came and brought me something that was delivered to the school. She was so excited because she was like, who's it from? Who's it from? Who's it from? It was from my dad. He had sent me chocolate covered strawberries because my parents always give us stuff for Valentine's Day. They always have. And yeah, but she was so excited.
Despite her reserved personality, Mekayla did have moments of social engagement, and according to CTV News, she occasionally spent time at the smoke pit, and it's in quotations, behind her school, a spot where students often gathered and either smoked cigarettes or other drugs, but all of Mekayla's friends have discussed that Mekayla did not use any of those substances.
She just hung out over there where everybody else was doing that.
Which is really for me personally, that's relatable because all of my friends in high school were smoking cigarettes, smoking pot. They would call it poking smot, and it took me forever to figure out what the fuck poking smot was. And they would call Tips Park Pitts Park, and like, I'm gonna go poke smot at Pitts, and I'd be like, what is happening? And so everyone else was always doing that, but I was like so afraid if I even took a puff of a cigarette, I would have a heart attack.
Yeah, I've never smoked a cigarette.
I've smoked lots now, but then I was very afraid.
Yeah, still haven't. But I am only 22, so.
You've got time.
Yeah.
You've got time to try it with your lungs that were born collapsed.
Yeah, that's part of it. They've seen enough damage as it is.
Yeah, they've been through enough.
Yeah.
One point of contention has been Mekayla's use of medication, and not that she was misusing any medication, but it has been revealed that Mekayla was on a course of Accutane, and if you don't know, that is a treatment for severe acne. And it's been noted that some of the side effects of Accutane can include extreme mood swings and increased vulnerability to emotional stress. Now, there is no evidence that links any Accutane use or its potential side effects to her disappearance, but it's just another layer of possibility that's kind of interwoven into this narrative of what has happened to Mekayla Bali.
Well, and it also might help inform her pleas for people on Snapchat to add her because she doesn't have any friends, and this feeling of not fitting in or feeling alone or friendless. It might be one of those pitfalls of a mood swing where she is feeling misunderstood by her world.
Yeah, especially when adolescence and hormones already suck. Throw in a medication that can radically alter your emotional perception and expression, and that's a 1-2 punch.
At least now they have those patches so teens don't have to.
I hate those stupid fucking patches.
So do I.
They're also for home use.
Right.
It's weird, but I used to want braces because I thought they looked cool. So
I had a student who got her braces off a few weeks ago, and she told me, she was like, I'm going to get my braces off and I'm sad because I love my braces.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? She was like, I don't know. I've had them for a long time and I'm attached to them.
They look I love how they look. I love how a mouth with braces looks.
I got some permanent marker.
No, not the same. It's just cute. It's like nerdy. I don't know.
Did you have braces?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you're just perfect.
Yeah, always have been, always will be.
Yeah.
So
I had braces because I'm not perfect.
Which we've always known.
Right.
That's not true. I mean, neither of us is perfect.
Yeah, I was like, what part is not true? I did have braces and I am not perfect.
No, I was referring to when I said I was perfect.
But that is true.
It is not.
No, that's the standard we should set.
Be like me or don't be.
Right.
Yeah. Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Nothing would get done. Nothing would get done.
Shakespeare said that.
Yorkton?
No, be like me. Be like Hayden or don't be.
Or just don't be. Providing additional context, Yorkton, Saskatchewan, the small city that Mekayla Bali is from, has a population of just over 16,000. And there is kind of a close-knit nature to this community. And it really played a significant role in the response to Mekayla's disappearance. Friends and family were able to describe her in detail and all seemed really shocked by her disappearance. According to Meadow Lake Now, the community very quickly rallied around Mekayla's family and they organized searches, distributed flyers, and spread awareness through every social media channel that they could. And the search for Mekayla really took off. So, despite these efforts, no clear answers have ever emerged. Now, I want to take you through Mekayla's last known whereabouts, the day she did vanish. Early morning, from about 6:41 to 8:20 a.m., Mekayla began her day like any other day. At 6:41 a.m., she actually texted her good friend Oksana and asked for a ride to the bank. And according to CBC News, Mekayla claimed that she needed to withdraw $5,000. This was unusual, as her bank account held nowhere near that amount. Oksana actually declined, noting that the bank would not be open until 8 a.m. Around 8:20 a.m., Mekayla's grandmother dropped her off at Sacred Heart High School. Surveillance footage confirmed that she entered the building and briefly connected to the school's Wi-Fi. However, within minutes, she exited through the back door. According to reports from CTV News, she walked away from the school and headed towards downtown Yorkton. And this early decision to leave school marked kind of a series of puzzling actions that have been confusing investigators ever since. Mid-morning, from roughly 8:51 to 10:39 a.m. At 8:51, Mekayla arrived at a TD Bank in Yorkton. Surveillance footage obtained from the RCMP, or the Royal Canadian Mounted Police,
Mounties,
showed her waiting outside the bank talking on her phone. And when the bank actually opened at 9 a.m., she withdrew $55, the majority of her account balance. However, there's a peculiar detail here. None of Mekayla's calls that day, where we see her constantly kind of on the phone, are recorded in her phone records. So investigators have determined that Mekayla was using what is referred to as voice over IP, or voice over internet protocol, or what is sometimes shortened to VoIP, like Kik and Snapchat, to not leave any kind of traditional traces of phone logs. So when I call you, or if I called you over Facebook Messenger, or if I called you over Snapchat, those things don't have traceable logs. That's all at the discretion of the company. And sometimes companies like that don't even keep logs. With that being said, there is no way to identify who she was speaking to on these phone calls that she was making. After leaving the bank, Mekayla walked to Terry's Pawn and Bargain. And according to the shop owner, Terry Hinn, Mekayla attempted to pawn a silver ring. The ring, however, was of little value, and Hinn declined the transaction. Hinn later described Mekayla's demeanor as calm and unbothered. By 9:15 a.m., Mekayla was at a combined Tim Hortons and Wendy's restaurant. Have you been to a Tim Hortons?
Yeah.
Was it good?
Yeah, I'm trying to place it because it was in, I think, the hotel that I stayed in, but also it was in like a food court area. But I wasn't at a mall, unless my hotel was kind of a mall.
Were they called Timbits?
I had some Timbits, yeah. I actually had stuff at that location in the hotel or wherever.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
You keep asking me questions and you make noise while I'm talking.
No, I would never do that.
We're going to have to ask the editor to weigh in on this. Editor? Yes, does it all the time. Okay, thank you. And then at the airport, on the way back to the U.S., I got some Timbits, the Tim Hortons in the airport. So yes, I liked it because I went back and got more.
I heard it's a really wonderful Canadian treat. I can't wait to try them.
When you move there?
When I moved to Canada, obviously. So by 9:15, again, Mekayla has entered this Tim Hortons Wendy's hybrid, and surveillance footage captured her entering with a backpack, which struck her friends as unusual. According to CBC News, Mekayla typically only ever carried a purse to school, suggesting that she may have packed with the intention of leaving town. I did review this footage, specifically on Blame It on Jorge's YouTube channel, where he does a really great breakdown of what's going on in every scene of the footage. And while Mekayla is at the Tim Hortons Wendy's combo restaurant, her behavior starts out pretty normal. She's sitting in a booth and she's looking at her phone, which, that's what most people would do if they were sitting by themselves. And she's kind of looking around, but not too much.
Is it like she's just glancing around at her surroundings
Yes.
or looking for someone?
No, that's how it appears at first. We're just kind of glancing at our surroundings, making sense of the noises around us. She gets up from her table. She walks through the initial entrance she came out of, and then she very quickly comes back from that direction, goes back through the hallway, and exits from a different exit. Then, some minutes later, she re-enters the restaurant, sits down at a different booth in a different corner, and again, she's looking at her phone, but then you notice that it looks like she might have two phones, that she could have two devices. And I don't want to cast emotions onto her behaviors because I don't know, but there was something about her body language that seemed almost unsettled to me, like an attempt at calm, but not really. And in this time frame, at 10:02 a.m., Mekayla texts her friend Shelby and says, "Hey, I need help." Now, her friend Shelby did not have her phone on her at the time, and so she wasn't able to respond. And at 10:30 a.m., 28 minutes following that first text message, Mekayla sent, "Never mind, I figured it out." Obviously, we have no idea what this was in reference to. And again, the origins, the means of this communication, what it was for is unknown. Between these text messages, though, from 10:02 to 10:30, Mekayla moves and speaks to a woman at a table essentially next to her. You know, the pathway that you would walk through in a restaurant, her table is a two-person table right across from the booth that Mekayla has been sitting at.
Right.
And in this conversation with this woman, Mekayla says and asks her kind of directions for how to get a hotel room. And then she asks the woman if she will help her get a hotel room. And the woman declines. She said, you know, whether it's asking for advice, whether you're asking me to get you a hotel room, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be a part of this. And from reporting, it seems that Mekayla took that information fine and just moved back to her booth. She was there for some more time, roughly until about 10:45 a.m. And so Mekayla kind of shifted around uncomfortably in that same booth for the next 15 minutes, going back and forth between her phone.
And Shelby's the only person she texts?
Yes. The only person that there's a record of her texting. So again, she was using apps like Kik and Snapchat, sending communications, because the whole time she's on the phone. She's talking on the phone off and on the whole time. But there's no record of that because she was using one of those apps. And we don't even know which of those apps for sure she was using at the time.
Yeah.
At 10:45 a.m., Mekayla left the restaurant, and for the next hour, there's no kind of account of her movements, what happened, where she went. There's very clear footage of her leaving the restaurant, but then gone.
For an hour.
For an hour.
And then we pick up with her where?
By 11:59 a.m., Mekayla is back at Sacred Heart High School, and while she was there, she met briefly with two of her friends.
How far is the Tim Hortons that she was at from the high school?
So that's a great question. And I will tell you that Blame It on Jorge's YouTube video has a really fantastic explainer with a map that kind of goes over all of her travel. And Crime Junkie has also released a map of her travel. I'm not sure.
But less than an hour.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be so notable that
she walked there from school.
Right. But the way that you talked about there being no trace of her for an hour, no idea of where she was, what she was doing, any of that, it implies that it would not have taken an hour to walk.
That is correct. Her getting from that Tim Hortons Wendy's back to school would not have taken that long. They talk about how this element of the time frame is really puzzling, and they think that knowing where she was at that time would unlock the mystery of this case.
Why? What happened after she went back to school? This is the day she disappeared, right?
This is the day she disappeared.
Okay. It's weird that she went back to school.
She went back to school, and she talked with her two friends, Allie Clarkson and Janice Buckle. And according to reports made by CTV News, Mekayla had told them that she planned to take a bus to Regina for a vacation.
I think it's Regina.
Shut the fuck up. Regina? Regina, Canada?
I was just kidding.
Do you know where Regina is?
Let me look it up.
We are looking at how to pronounce the name of the capital city of the Saskatchewan province of Canada. Do not say Regina, but rather Regina.
Wait, is it really Regina?
It's Regina.
Oh, God.
Wow, I could cut all of that out and just make myself look like I fucking know Canada.
That's wild. Regina.
Regina.
Okay, so she tells her friends she's going on a vacation to Regina.
And the third largest city is Venus.
What the fuck? Regina. Okay, fierce work. Either way, Allie and Janice have both talked about how they believed that Mekayla did have 2 cell phones. They both noted that they believed that she had 2 devices. And that does align with what we see in the footage at Tim Hortons, where she seemed to kind of be tampering and messing with one of her phones while using the other. And the possession of these 2 phones raises the question of, what was the purpose? What was the purpose of the secondary phone? And I'm going to talk about this more later, but it immediately brings me back to towards the beginning of my teaching career. And I would have students that would have 2 phones. And I would say, what do you need 2 phones for? What are you doing? And one student was very, very honest. And he was like, I use this for drug deals. This is the phone that I use to complete drug deals. And I was like, okay, I'm so glad you feel like being so honest with me. You're going to have to talk with somebody about that because I can't hear that and then unhear it. But the amount of students I had seen come through with 2 cell phones, given what I know now, is alarming. Despite being a teenager, it is very hard to understand what teenagers are thinking.
Yeah. No, I know.
So.
Yeah, you are a teenager, right?
Yeah, I'm so youthful.
13.
Now we're moving into the afternoon and we're talking 12:15 to 1:45 p.m. Mekayla left school and made her way to the STC bus depot in Yorkton.
When she went back to school and talked to her 2 friends, did she go to any of her classes that day?
I do not think so. I think she was there briefly because there is footage of her in the, like, it's almost like a cafeteria open space and you see her come and go. So according to a staff member interviewed by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Mekayla inquired about bus schedules and learned the next bus to Regina wouldn't depart until 5 p.m. She didn't purchase a ticket and left shortly afterwards. From the bus depot, she walked to the Trail Stop restaurant, which was located nearby. This restaurant was the last confirmed location where Mekayla was seen. Witnesses at the Trail Stop reported seeing Mekayla eating alone. One witness noted that she briefly interacted with a man described as having a cross tattoo with flames on his left arm. According to CTV News, this man later came forward after a public appeal and was cleared of any involvement. He stated that his interaction with Mekayla was limited to holding the door open for her as she exited the restaurant. The lack of surveillance footage inside the Trail Stop has also been a significant obstacle for investigators. No cameras to track her movements, and the events that transpired after 1:45 p.m. remain a mystery.
It's interesting that he held the door for her, and that was the extent of it according to him, but that he was so notable that other people claimed that he interacted with her in a more meaningful way than that.
Right. We'll revisit that in just a bit.
Is he sus?
No?
Yeah, he doesn't sound sus to me, but it is interesting. I wonder if there's some sort of prejudice because of the tattoo, if that
Right.
was the most
Well, and I think
identifying feature.
you want to account for anyone who had any communication with her that day.
Yeah.
You want to hear and talk to anybody who is known to have had any kind of communication with her. Because she could have even said something in passing, like, oh, sorry, I'm headed out to go to, I don't know, Road 123. Anything that might give some kind of indication as to where she's ended up. So again, now, after 1:45, we have no idea where Mekayla is. At 3:40 p.m., Mekayla's grandmother arrived at Sacred Heart High School to pick her up, as she did every day. When Mekayla was nowhere to be found, her grandmother just initially assumed there had been some kind of mix-up. By 4 p.m., concern grew when Mekayla failed to attend her violin practice. According to CTV News, this was highly uncharacteristic, as Mekayla was very committed to her lessons and had a recital coming up soon. Later that evening, Mekayla Bali contacted the RCMP to report her daughter missing. This marked the beginning of an intensive investigation involving the RCMP's General Investigations Section, or GIS. By 7 a.m. the following morning, Mekayla's phone was no longer active. And we're obviously talking about the phone that we know of as her main driver, her main device. Investigators believe the battery died. There's no evidence that it was deliberately shut off or turned off. When we look at the events of April 12th, there are a lot of questions that arise. Mekayla's erratic movements, going to the bank, the pawn shop, trying to what seems like collect as much cash as possible. And
Rent
then
a hotel room.
Then going to the bus depot. It does suggest that Mekayla was preparing for some kind of movement. Whether or not it was actually to Regina or if there was someone else involved is still unclear. Also, her text to Shelby, along with her behavior at Tim Hortons, indicate that she may have been under some level of stress or seeking some kind of help. Maybe a moment of clarity that maybe I'm doing something I shouldn't be. One of the things that I really enjoyed about, so again, I'm now going to refer to Todd Grande, the doctor of counselor education who kind of talked about some of Mekayla's behavior, is the use of kick. And like we've already discussed this, really opens up young people to predators. And her decision to carry that backpack and withdraw money, I think gives a lot of credence to the idea that she was preparing to meet somebody and go with them somewhere.
Or at least preparing to depart. The behavior and her movements are kind of confusing when you think about her trying to get a hotel room in that area near her school, I assume. That specifically is throwing me off. If she was asking for that lady to help her, like to do it for her or whatever, or if she was just asking her how to do it so that when she got where she was going, she knew what to do, how to behave in that situation, maybe. That's the part that I have the biggest hang up on.
What we do know is that it does seem like she did intend to leave Yorkton, even if we're not sure where she was trying to go. Obviously, what kind of still stands out the most is this gap in the timeline from 10:45 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. Making a determination about what happened in that rough hour, which she did not travel from Tim Hortons to her school for an hour.
Not
by
directly.
foot. Yeah. So what is it that happened in that hour of time? The investigation that follows Mekayla's disappearance was fraught with challenges and dead ends. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police took charge of the search, and they began immediately trying to piece together some kind of sensical narrative that would allow them to find Mekayla.
Were they able to get phone records and trace her footsteps during that time? If she was so active on that phone while she was at Tim Hortons, she probably was on the phone during that hour.
Well, and I think part of the issue is that we're talking 2016, and if we're talking about using her primary phone that she had, not the second phone or whatever, we're in a position of, if it predates genuine GPS in the device, there is no way to say where she was exactly. And they can triangulate cell phone signals, but that only gives you a general area. And we know all of her movements were contained up until at least 1:45 in this one specific location. So I think if there was anything to be done with tracking her location via cell phone pings or anything of that nature, they would have found it. I think they would have explored it.
I guess I'm also curious what shops or what restaurants were on the path from the Tim Hortons that she was at to her school.
So the Royal Canadian Mounted Police began retracing her movements, relying heavily on the surveillance footage from the businesses in Yorkton. And this is how they kind of traced that backbone, that timeline that I just shared with you. Investigators interviewed witnesses who interacted with Mekayla that day. For example, the staff member at the SCT bus depot recalled that Mekayla asked about bus schedules, but noted that she did not purchase a ticket. At the trail stop, witnesses described a brief interaction with the man who had the distinctive tattoo of a flaming cross. However, again, that's panned out to be nothing. The RCMP classified Mekayla's disappearance as a missing persons case, and within weeks, the GIS, or the General Investigation Service, took over. And this move signaled the seriousness of the investigation, as the GIS only handles major crimes. So I know we have already talked about how she used these VoIP services. She's used these apps to do a lot of her communicating, which created a substantial obstacle when the RCMP and GIS began really digging into her case. There was no kind of traditional phone calls or text messages that would help determine where she was or where she had gone. And they were really only left again with talking to those people that Mekayla interacted with face to face. When the RCMP made efforts to obtain access to all of those social media accounts, it took 10 months to navigate the legal and technical hurdles required to retrieve partial data from these platforms, which has been substantiated by both CTV News and RCMP. And by the time those records were accessed, much of the information had either been deleted by the platform or was no longer available due to the platform's data policies. The gaps in this communication history, again, have fueled speculation about whether or not she was in contact with someone she met online, particularly if she was in a situation where she was being groomed and exploited. Throughout the investigation, the RCMP have followed up on over more than 1,000 tips, including alleged sightings of Mekayla across Canada and even internationally in the United States. The cross-tattooed man at the Trail Stop restaurant, when the man came forward, because again, there was a public cry for him to step forward and kind of share what he knew about Mekayla, he was ultimately cleared of suspicion of involvement because he did again explain that it was just literally opening the door for her. It kind of served to further this idea that they'd hit a dead end. No idea what happened after 1:45 p.m. that day. In January 2017, so roughly 10 months after Mekayla's official disappearance, a tip suggested that Mekayla was spotted at the Grey Eagle Entertainment Center, which is a casino in Calgary. Again, casinos are known for their extensive surveillance systems, which gave investigators hope that this lead could be substantiated. However, after reviewing hours of footage, the RCMP found no evidence that Mekayla was present that day. Another tip came in August 2019 when a man in Edmonton claimed he had met a young woman who introduced herself as Mekayla outside a bar. He described her as sweet, gentle, and naive, traits consistent with how friends and family described her. Despite the compelling nature of this account, investigators were unable to verify its accuracy. Lastly, several other tips have placed Mekayla in cities like Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton, all west of Yorkton. These alleged sightings align with her earlier statements about wanting to move to a larger city, as reported by CTV News. However, again, none of these tips can be confirmed nor substantiated through surveillance footage or eyewitness accounts. Ultimately, this case remains unsolved. The RCMP has run up against issues of the limitations of the technology and what is available to them from these platforms, a lack of any kind of eyewitness accounts that are credible, a lack of surveillance equipment across the small city of Yorkton. So there are moments that are sadly unaccounted for. And then also cross-border challenges. So again, Kik and Snapchat are both US-based platforms, and there are international privacy laws, which have also complicated the situation. Throughout this investigation, Mekayla's family has been absolutely relentless in their search for answers. Her mother, Paula, has organized vigils, shared updates on social media, and collaborated with initiatives like the Homeward Bound program. This program displays images of missing persons, including Mekayla, on semi-trailers traveling across North America, ensuring that her face remains in the public eye. I thought this was so cool. Not that she's missing, but this Homeward Bound program where this face, the reward information, who to call, is plastered across the side of these semi-trucks that are traveling across North America.
Right.
And I think what a clever way to get the message out that we are still looking for this girl.
Mm-hmm. What was her home situation like? Because it sounds like she left voluntarily. And in the beginning, when you said that this was an unsolved case, I thought, well, she's probably dead. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that I think that she's probably dead.
I don't know either. I genuinely... So first, let me answer your question. I don't know about her home life other than the fact that she lived with her mom and grandma, and that was her support system. Beyond that, I don't know much about her home life or family situation. Her community of Yorkton also played a significant role. Volunteers were in high supply, and they've shared her story online, raised awareness about her disappearance, and these efforts are still ongoing. The first real theory that people consider when talking about where is Mekayla Bali is the fact that Mekayla ran away. One of the most plausible theories is that Mekayla chose to leave her life behind and start new. This theory is supported by her behavior in the weeks leading up to her disappearance and her actions on April 12th. Mekayla often spoke about leaving Yorkton for a larger city, such as Regina or Saskatoon. Who is naming these cities? Regina and Saskatoon. Honestly, I like the name Saskatoon.
Probably indigenous persons.
Well, when you say that, I feel bad.
Well, it doesn't mean that when we look at it from a
Western perspective.
that it can't be funny.
Yeah. On the day she disappeared, again, she withdrew that $55, the majority of her available funds. She tried to pawn a silver ring, carried a backpack, which was unusual for her. And additionally, she made those statements to her friends at school when she went back that she was going to go on vacation to Regina. Her social media activity also suggests, again, that she was seeking connection outside of that circle. If you are to look through Reddit about the Mekayla Bali case, you can find supposed and alleged screenshots of Mekayla's Instagram account and potentially Finsta or Burner or whatever kind of accounts you want to call secondary accounts. And from my understanding, there is a great deal of mentioning of suicide in these accounts. But again, I don't want to dismiss her case as simply being a very well planned suicide where she completed suicide and no one has been able to find her. But just to share that, when we talk about her social media presence, those things do exist within the ether. But because it's not part of any kind of official report, I'm not giving too much credence to it as we have this discussion today. However, along with this plausible theory, we also have to consider the challenges of her running away. First off, Mekayla didn't have the resources on her own. There's no way she was going to make it to Regina and manage to live on her own independently with $55 and a silver ring that a pawn trader wouldn't accept. Also, no one who knew Mekayla has heard from her since April 12th, 2016. It seems unlikely that any person would be able to completely break from everyone they knew and not have any kind of contact. And lastly, the nature of these untraceable platforms has made it very difficult for them to make any kind of sense about her communication patterns. The second theory is abduction. Mekayla was either abducted by someone she knew or a stranger. And what really gives a lot of credence to this possibility is that Mekayla was using those anonymous apps like Kik
To seek attention from strangers or connection with strangers.
Yes. Trying to look for some kind of validation and connection.
Right. And while she may have been being entirely true to herself, that does not mean that she was getting a true version of somebody in response.
Correct. And so here we have this vulnerable young woman who's seeking that connection. Who's to know what kind of person might have manipulated and taken advantage of that need? Again, the man with the cross tattoo has been cleared of all suspicion. And what professionals really point to is this kind of confusion and upset around Mekayla's text message to Shelby about, hey, I need help, followed by, never mind, I figured it out. And the Missing Children Society of Canada has really emphasized that the ambiguity of these messages suggest that Mekayla was likely in a precarious situation that she wasn't sure how to navigate at this point. Additionally, out of the more than 1,000 tips that the RCMP has received about Mekayla's disappearance, none of them have come true to bear any weight. And so it's hard to assume or to think she was abducted without someone having seen something.
Yeah, I've got questions for you, but I want you to finish before I start asking them.
Okay. Theory 3, suicide. The possibility that Mekayla may have taken her own life, which is largely based on the history of self-harm, which Interpol is such a nebulous concept to me, this international
Police.
Yes. And in her Interpol file, again, it makes note of that self-harm. And one of the things that was more concerning is that on Mekayla, one of those secondary Instagram accounts, she put in her bio, goodbye, simply goodbye, raising concerns that she may have been in emotional distress. And again, I said I didn't want to use her social media presence as cannon fodder for this conversation, but that's reported by CTV News. Lastly, it is possible that Mekayla fell victim to human trafficking. This theory is largely supported by her age, her online activity, and the potential westward movement that has been reported via tips. Again, those kind of secretive and shrouded interactions on Kik lend itself to some kind of predator making an attempt to traffic her. Additionally, supposed sightings of Mekayla in cities like Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver align align with known human trafficking routes in Western Canada. The man who reported meeting a young woman named Mekayla outside a bar in Edmonton, again, described this individual as being naive and gentle, which does sound a lot like Mekayla. Mekayla Bali's disappearance is a haunting mystery that leaves me with way more questions than I do have answers. Each theory, whether she ran away, was abducted, took her own life, or became a victim of trafficking, offer a possible explanation, but each falls short of being a definitive closing to Mekayla's case. Neither of them seems more likely than the other to me. What are your thoughts?
Well, my question was going to be, what do you think happened? Like, which of those theories do you think is the most likely?
Here's how I'm going to methodically discuss what I think happened. I'm going to eliminate the things that I think are the least likely in order of being least likely to most likely, even though factually I think they're all just as likely as the other. I think suicide is the least likely.
I agree.
I think that someone typically makes the choice to complete suicide in a manner that would not leave them unfindable, that their body would never be found. And so I don't think that Mekayla went through this grand plan of setting herself up to end her own life without it ever being found. I also think there's a huge difference between feelings and ideations of suicide and completing suicide.
Well, and self-harm, like cutting, which is what it sounds like she was doing. Doesn't sound like she was involved in a lot of drugs, which is another form, but it sounds like she was cutting. And there's a difference between practicing those types of self-harm, not habits, but...
If every person who I personally knew who cut themselves
also
completed suicide,
right,
I would be down several many friends. So I don't think that's likely.
I honestly think that the other three theories balled up together seems like the most likely scenario. Like, she was reaching out on social media for strangers and she found somebody that she was connecting with who was grooming her, priming her to
I absolutely believe someone was grooming her. I think that she found someone. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I do think you're right. I think that she was groomed. I don't know what of those three scenarios is what came to pass, but I do think she met someone online who put her in this very terrible position through manipulation and dishonesty.
So I think that she was primed to try to leave to go meet up with them elsewhere. I think that that is evidenced by the flowers that she received around Valentine's Day and the second phone that she very likely had, the trying to get the money out of her account and the trying to pawn the ring. Seems to me like she told somebody, well, yeah, I do have a way that I can access money to get out of town. And that person did not have good intentions, obviously. And so they, in essence, kidnapped her, even though she left voluntarily. I don't know that she realized that she was leaving voluntarily permanently. And then I think that she was kidnapped after she left on her own. And then it was all just this ploy to traffic her. I'm confused by the man who said that she was naive in a brief exchange. I don't know what that means. How do you talk to somebody for a short period of time and you decide that they're naive? That just seems like such a specific word. And I feel like naivete has to be something that is something you realize about somebody over time, not in a brief snapshot. I don't know if that means that she seemed young, youthful, and because that is a lot of times conflated with being naive.
So is being idealistic.
Right. I'm really hung up on that choice of word because in a brief exchange, I don't know that I've ever met somebody in a brief exchange outside of a bar. So I'm going to assume that it was less than 5 minutes.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but then I also think if I were still teaching today and a brand new teacher came in and they were like, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to love teaching. It's going to be incredible. I'd be like, all right, you are naive.
But that's being naive about a very specific thing that they clearly have no experience in. What was their conversation about that led him to walk away thinking this person seems naive?
Yeah.
As a whole person.
I don't know the details of their conversation. I just know that it's not substantiated that it was Mekayla. Could have been.
It was somebody who introduced herself as Mekayla, but that doesn't mean that it is Mekayla Bali.
That it is the Mekayla. As the purveyor of a true crime podcast,
What? You record?
Uh-huh.
People listen?
People are listening to this. It's so hard for my mind to not immediately go to the place of murder. It is hard for me to not think this young girl was picked up, fooled, and murdered somewhere and hidden away.
See, I think that she would have been trafficked before she was killed.
I don't know. I think it's just, I mean, you know what calls for me more than anything else in true crime? It's not cases of bank robbery. It's not cases of mistaken identity. It's the big ones. It's the big unforgivable crimes. And so I think my mind has trained itself to go to that worst place first. But who am I kidding? I'm sure human trafficking isn't a fucking breeze either. And I would say that I don't think human trafficking is necessarily as big as what it's made out to be. But in my time teaching, I saw a girl who was trafficked, who did have a second phone, who was fortunately found out to be trafficked and retrieved from another city and brought back home. And so it's impossible to say. The one thing I can say is I don't think that Mekayla Bali completed suicide. I do not think that is what has happened to her.
I do not think that that was her plan when she was leaving. I'm not going to say that if she was in a situation where she was being trafficked, that high stress situation for the victims of it would not then make that a viable solution to her problems. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that she left there suicidal and her plan was to leave and to take her life.
This is a tough one. There isn't enough information to really steer investigators in any one particular direction. There's a kind of aimlessness that comes with the case and the facts of the case. Where do we go next? Of all of the things that we don't know, I want to go over the things that we do know. Mekayla was a bright, kind, and complex individual whose story should be told. Whether or not Mekayla is still alive and with us is something we do not know. But her family does maintain an unwavering commitment to finding her and bringing her home. If you or anyone you know have information about Mekayla Bali's disappearance, please contact the RCMP or Crime Stoppers. Every lead, no matter how small, can bring us closer to the truth. You can reach the RCMP at 1-844-880-6518. You can also remain anonymous and call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. You can also use the anonymous tip online by going to www.p3tips.com/206 or through the Saskatchewan Crime Stoppers website. The reward for information leading to Mekayla Bali's safe return has been increased twice, once from $25,000 to $50,000, now to $100,000. Your dogs have been nightmares today. It's kind of an unsatisfying case.
It's very, very dissatisfying.
Which, not that any of our cases are ever satisfying, but there's usually some element of justice or probability. Like with Caleb Deal, do we know for sure that he is not alive? Mm-hmm. No, we do not.
I do.
But we know that whatever has happened is the responsibility of Ricky Howard. In this case, there is nowhere to turn. There is no lead to follow.
Yeah. I mean, no case. I mean, we're talking about crime. There is no case that is going to be satisfying. But even earlier when you said something about the facts that we know about this case, and I was like, what facts? It doesn't feel like there are...
We know nothing.
Right. We know she went to school. She left school, went to Timmy Hort's. She went back to school, tried to pawn a ring at some point in there, got the $55 out of the bank, and probably went to the bus depot. And then that's it. That's all we know. Mm-hmm. It barely feels like a fact.
Right.
Which has to be why this case is still open and why it has been so difficult for anybody to investigate, because it's one of those instances where the crime happened, but the law and the law enforcement system had not caught up to the time yet for the crime. Wow. Time and crime rhyme.
Who knew that?
I bet you can make a pun.
Time to crime?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a novel idea.
When older people talk about those damn kids and their social media, it's hard for me to not raise an eyebrow out of frustration, because I think, what do you think kids are doing on social media? What do you think they're doing that's so bad that we should forsake their use of social media?
It's not that. People don't like things that they don't understand. So it's the unknown for them. And also, we've talked about this before. Kids are treated like their interests are frivolous. And so, the kids are into this social media stuff. That must be something silly. Well, yeah, sure, but it's also dangerous.
Right,
Like
and that's my point.
It's like when a baby is interested in that open oven door and they put their hands on it, or like the sharp pair of scissors and then somebody gets cut. Or
Sometimes the unknown is dangerous. Sometimes the fear of the unknown is justified. And I have no pause in saying maybe Kik isn't necessarily a social media service that teenagers need to use. I think they could forgo Kik. I think that maybe we can try to monitor them a little more closely in terms of, hey, do you have more than one phone? Do you have more than one device you communicate with people on? But I think that would require open conversation with parents and family members who aren't ready to engage that way yet.
I think it would require teenagers to be willing to divulge that information, even if it were true. If they got a phone from somebody and they were told by that person, don't tell anybody that you have this, and their parents ask if you have another phone, probably going to say no.
Right. It is a complicated, almost inextricable system where there isn't a clear path forward.
And we have no insight into what the family dynamic was like.
No.
Which is also, I think, could help at least us armchair detectives try to better understand maybe some of the other dynamics that were at play that could have informed why this person might choose to try to walk out of her life. Was her dad in the picture? Do we know she lived with mom and grandma? Is dad dead? Is he not in the picture? Did somebody reach out via this stuff and say, hey, I'm actually your dad? I mean,
I don't know, but dad is never brought up in any of the source material.
So if she never knew dad and then somebody reaches out and she is divulging information about herself unknowingly, this person could be like, I am your dad. I do. The possibilities are endless.
So, according to what I'm reading here, Mekayla Bali's father is not officially known. However, a man named Rick Bright was put forward as her possible biological father. The identity of Mekayla's father has been a subject of uncertainty within the case. Her birth name was Mekayla Margaret Kim Niebergall, which was changed to Bali on September 11th, 2015, about 7 months before her disappearance. Her mother, Paula Marie Bali, works as a consultant for the Ministry of Social Services of the government of Saskatchewan, and she has 2 younger siblings, and Mekayla lived with her mother, aunt, and maternal grandmother in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Mekayla's maternal grandfather passed away in March 2016, 1 month before she went missing.
As frustrating as open cases are, obviously, the more widespread the reach of them, the more likely they are to be resolved. So I'm really glad that you brought the case of Mekayla Bali, at least to our humble audience.
It is my hope that the Saskatchewanians who do listen to our podcast maybe know something about Mekayla Bali, and maybe they can help spread the word, and maybe together we can figure out what has happened to Mekayla Bali. Listeners, whether you be American or Canadian in origin, if you are struggling with any thoughts of suicide or other mental health crises, you can reach out to the suicide hotline or mental health crisis hotline at 988.
A complete list of sources and any links can be found in the show notes.
And that's it for this week's episode. If you enjoyed listening and want to hear more, please subscribe, download every single episode, and then give us a 5-star rating and make sure to leave us a review.
We've got a couple weeks left of our goal of 50 ratings and reviews. So if you have not given us a review yet, please make your way over to Apple Podcasts to do so.
Or wherever you listen, as long as you are able to give a review.
Recommend us to a friend and make sure you're following us at End of Crime Pod on Instagram.
And like us on Facebook at Until the End of Crime. Join our discussion group.
Our email address is endofcrimepod@gmail.com, so feel free to reach out with questions or episode suggestions.
Thank you for listening.
Until the next crime.